So we have the blurb in this panel has talked about which one of the various different carbon sequestration strategies delivers the most efficiency. I really don't want to start that fight here, but I do want to proceed with a lot of different perspectives from a variety of different organizations. So Erik is working with Stockholm Exergi on a BECCS project. Christina's in InPlanet looks at enhanced rock weathering, and Maarten at Carboneers works with biochar. So we have a lot of different technological solutions on the stage tonight. We'll later look at the buy side and the market making side with Alice and Gabrielle. But with that sort of stage setting out of the way, I think I'd like to just kick off with Erik to talk about sort of what the Stockholm Exergi is doing with BECCS and why they believe that it's an effective use of effective carbon sequestration method.
Yeah, so thank you. So I'm Erik. I'm from Stockholm Exergi. Stockholm Exergi, we are a energy utility operating in Stockholm, Sweden. We are not a startup. We've been around since 1850s. But today we are active in district heating, district cooling, renewable power, and waste treatment. And now we're moving into to permanent removals. So we are retrofitting carbon capture technology to our largest bio-CHP that we have in Stockholm. That will allow us to remove 800,000 tons of carbon annually. This carbon will then be stored with Northern Lights outside the coast of Norway. The plant runs on residues from Swedish forestry. And we will go online with this project in 2028. The investment decision was made last year. And construction is in progress. So right now, mostly groundworks, and the first steel will come on ground this summer. And why do we think BECCS is a good one? I think that there are many carbon removal technologies around, and obviously, a benefit with a technology like BECCS is that it's easily quantifiable, because in the end you have the carbon in a tank and then you pump it into the subsurface. But also when it comes to these different technologies, you should really look at where you are and what is a workable solution in your geography. And in Sweden we have a very big forestry industry, so we can source these residues locally, and they have been used for a long time for bioenergy. I mean, we are very big on bioenergy in Sweden because of these residues that otherwise just would be left in the forest, and now we can use them to offset fossil fuels for heating and producing power. So BECCS is a natural choice in Sweden. We are retrofitting this carbon capture equipment to this already existing bioenergy plant, allowing us to remove 800,000 tons a year. The total potential in Sweden, just by retrofitting to existing point sources, biogenic point sources, would be 30 million tons a year. In Europe, it's around 120 million a year. So, using for BECCS, it's a very just retrofitting to already existing point sources is a very natural way of scaling BECCS removals.
Great. I think the issue of sort of the most appropriate source for the most appropriate location is going to come up a lot in this panel, so it's good that you brought it up early. I'll move on to Christina to just talk about enhanced rock weathering and the work that InPlanet's doing on that.
Great, yes. So I work with a technique called enhanced rock weathering, which most of you have probably not heard of, but it's basically speeding up a natural process. So chemical weathering naturally removes carbon all the time. The problem is that this process is really slow. So what we do is we speed it up by taking crushed reactive volcanic rock, and we spread it on farmland where this process happens much faster. At InPlanet, we deploy only in Brazil for various reasons. One being that there's a lot of readily available feedstock material, a lot of basaltic volcanic rock available that's local, that are byproducts of existing quarrying infrastructure. There's a lot of farmland in Brazil as well. And on top of that, there's a lot of tropically depleted soils that are lacking in nutrients, and something that enhanced rock weathering can do, in addition to carbon removal, is provide a lot of co-benefits for farmers, restoring those soils, raising the soil pH, reversing acidification, potentially even boosting crop yields. Unlike BECCS, enhanced rock weathering is a little more difficult to quantify inherently because it happens at in the open. It's what's called an open system pathway. It's weathering occurring in a field, and it's heterogeneous, it's difficult to measure, but it doesn't mean it's not quantifiable. It definitely is. It's just a little more challenging than closed system pathways where you can measure CO2 directly.
Great. And then, Maarten, if you want to talk a bit about Carboneers and some of the work you've been doing with biochar to round us out.
Yes, we're a Dutch startup and have biochar projects in the global south, so in India and in Ghana as well. And we work in a distributed manner, so at community level. And we have a network of over 5,000 different farming communities in those countries. And it's a bit, like Erik said as well, you need to contextualize your equipment to the country you're working in. And for us, that's actually low capex machines at farm level so that the farmer can produce itself biochar. And I think that the quick summary is that we remove carbon through making biochar of agricultural waste and looking in its CO2. But next to removing carbon, we're also boosting the incomes of the farmers. So we pay them directly via mobile money. And next to it, we also give the biochar for free to the farmers. So they employ it directly on their own soil, boosting their soil yield as well.
Great. So Alice, why don't you lead us off, first of all, by explaining why the Mercedes Formula One team is going to be a buyer of carbon credits, and then sort of jumping on from that, looking at sort of with the three different sort of techniques and some of the others that have been around, sort of what you look for as a buyer in this market in terms of solutions for your carbon credit purchasing needs.
Yeah, so it's really exciting to be here today. As a Formula One team, you might be wondering why I'm sitting on a panel talking about carbon removals, but it's a really important part of our net zero strategy. So we're committed to net zero by 2030 for what we call our race team control emissions. So it's everything that takes us from going from factory to the racetrack and back. And we're really committed to reduction, so looking at activities that we can do to reduce our emissions, whether that's investing in sustainable aviation fuel, biofuels in our trucks, or looking at how we move people and equipment more efficiently. But we know that, and the science tells us, and I'm sure everyone on this panel agrees, that carbon removals are going to be critical to our net zero journey and critical to our success. So we've recognised that as a team, we need to be investing and that we have a really exciting and important role to help scale the sector by demonstrating and investing in what we believe to be really credible technologies. So we've already been invested for a number of years in carbon removals around reforestation and regenerative agriculture in the UK, but really excited that today we're launching a new an expansion of our portfolio, which is 7 new projects in 6 new geographies, really looking at these amazing kind of technological carbon removals across some of the great projects we've got here today, so InPlanet and Carboneers, looking at how can we as a team be using these technologies and supporting their growth right from the early stages all the way through to hopefully scalability and bringing them down the cost curve.
Great, and it's exciting news as well. So Gabrielle, why don't we bring it all together a bit as somebody who's looking at the market more broadly, and in terms of sort of the different technologies and the different needs that Alice has mentioned in terms of the buyers, where do you see the sort of this market going in the next few years?
So I've been working on climate for a long time, basically 30 years or more. So I always feel like I should apologise to everybody present. I haven't fixed it yet, sorry, but I'm still working on it. But this whole space of carbon removals is captivating for this reason. First of all, it is the net of net zero. It's as simple as what goes up has to come back down again. So separate from all the other credits and all the other projects, which I think are essential, by the way, and very important, is this: it goes up, it has to come down. So then the question is, how do you do it? And so we've been working with Mercedes Formula One for quite a while to put this portfolio together. The deal is due to be announced tomorrow morning. So you're getting a sneak preview, which is the only reason we can say 2 of the companies who are in it is because they're right here on the stage. It is amazing. It is amazing to think that you can remove carbon from the air while also increasing crop yields, while also increasing the income for farmers, while also bringing more minerals to the soils and so on. When I started on this whole carbon removal space, everybody said to me, "Oh, do you mean trees or machines?" That was it. It was trees or machines. There's this or that. But actually, some of the most exciting and innovative approaches are the ones that are in between, the ones that we were just hearing about. So InPlanet and Carboneers are 2 of our favourite projects. People always say, "What's your favourite project?" And I'm not allowed to say, you can't have favourites. But these are 2 of them. But also, so is Stockholm Exergi. We didn't quite, well, we've got another deal to announce, and we didn't quite manage to get it over the line. But we're so close, aren't we, Erik? Because these are the brilliant people who are figuring out not just how to stop the climate problem getting worse, but how to take the CO2 back out of the air and keep it out. And we need that already for every organisation that needs to get to net zero. We need that. We also need it for solving it, for going beyond. That's what the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says. So it's an immense privilege. These are the people who are doing it. We just talk about it and try and make it happen and facilitate. So then that question of what's the landscape now and how to go about it? What's fascinating to me, we've been working at Curate on carbon removals now for 3.5, 4 years we've been going. And for a lot of that time, the conversations we were having with enterprises were, let me explain to you what this is. Let me try to help you understand. But in the last 6 to 12 months, I think, we've started to see something different, a really tangible change in sustainability teams and financial teams. That this is something that's material, it's part of our climate plan, we need to understand it. So a lot of our work, the portfolio that we put together for Mercedes F1 has a lot in it about how to go about this. So basically, item 1, make a balanced portfolio across all the different approaches. Item 2, de-risk it. So when we started on this, people were worried about risk of reputation. Am I going to end up on the cover of The Guardian for making the wrong thing, buying the wrong thing? Now they're worried about risk of non-delivery. This is an entirely new industry. How do I know it's going to come? How can I de-risk that also? So thinking about that risk, and we've made risk assessments, project assessments as a product for us because so many people were asking for it. Can you look at this project and tell us how we manage the risk? Can you put us a portfolio together and tell us how to manage the risk? So that's 2 things. It's basically go across the portfolio, manage the risk. And the third thing is follow the direction that the standards are going in. Because it's been a voluntary space up to now, but I call this space pre-compliance. Because it used to be that the standards were all saying, in 2050, you need to do your net zero, but don't worry about it until then. But that's coming forward into focus. It's now in the 2030s. Science-Based Targets Initiative is coming out with that. The ISO net zero standard, the UK ETS, the way that the EU is thinking about this. Around the world, we're starting to see this is early 2030s. So now in this state of pre-compliance, what does it look like? How can you actually future-proof what you're doing now so that you engage in the right things? And that's what we had a brilliant time putting together for the Mercedes F1 portfolio.
Great. So I think we're going to have a very lively conversation. But I'd like to make sure that everyone from the audience who'd like to ask a question is included. So please do note that there are options to ask a question through Slido on either side of me. If you just scan the QR code and write through and write your question in the chat box, I'll try to get to as many as I can. But in the meantime, I think Alice, as the one buyer on the list, I'm going to ask you the sort of question about sort of what do you look at in terms of judging risks, as Christine mentioned, and in terms of effectiveness, in terms of sort of what gives you the most reputational but also removal bang for your buck in terms of how you do allocate the resources that you do have?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And for us, actually, one of the big things was working to understand the risk. Because again, as a buyer, you are not the expert in the carbon removals market. And it's very complicated. It's moving very quickly. And the technologies themselves, the science behind enhanced rock weathering, even just understanding that is incredibly complex. And so finding the experts in the room to have the conversations with and just start to understand risk. I think it is also getting comfortable with a level of risk. You're not going to be able to de-risk this space completely today. So as a buyer, it's about working with your finance teams, your procurement teams, to help them understand the risks they're taking so that they are very informed. And that's been really useful for us, being able to kind of talk about what does durability mean? What does that mean to you today? What do we mean when we look at things like what the cost is going to do in the future? And a big thing for us is we really believe that as a sports team, we have an opportunity to kind of amplify these projects and help support their scaling by sending market signals. So what does that mean for long-term kind of cost development and all of those kind of things? So when we're looking for projects, we were really looking for ones that we thought could kind of fulfill a lot of those criteria, but also crucially, we go racing across the globe. We go to 24 races a year. And so having a portfolio that touched upon the geographic diversity of Formula One was really important and also aligned to our business. We build R&D cars and we put them through the most amazing and intense race weekends. So looking at projects that aligned with this kind of engineering ethos, really looking at innovation and really supporting those kind of sides of it work as well. So kind of aligning both the business side of what we do and also helping the business understand the level of risk that we're taking and being comfortable with knowing there is risk, but it's okay to be transparent about that and be really open and honest in your communications.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think I'll ask the three sell-side analysts sort of a similar question around sort of how do you sort of match up on your side from the sellers to the potential buyers in light of what Alice has said in terms of issues around reputation, in terms of making sure that they're comfortable with it. Do you have a lot of engagement with prospective buyers, and what do you feel like are the most important things for your respective businesses to make them feel comfortable with your products? I started with Erik last time, so I'll go from Maarten this time.
I think for us, we're a small team and we're biochar nerds. That's what we love. That's what we're good at. And we know the science part. That's something we can deliver. And the information on that part, we are very comfortable with talking about. But I think next to us, we need a party that can also do the education part and also give a larger picture of the risks involved and what the options are to solve them. And I think that for us is also why Curate as a partner is very important to help us with it. Because a bunch of engineers and PhDers and biochar nerds are not enough to cover this space.
They're very good engineers.
Yeah, I think we're in a similar situation. So I'm also a certified enhanced rock weathering nerd. I'm actually the vice president of science. So yeah, I think having an intermediary partner like Curate that's able to translate something that's very complicated to a buyer in a coherent way is very helpful, actually. And I would also say that reputational risks for buyers are also reputational risks for us too, right? I think we don't want to be doing anything that's going to cause us any issues or any trouble. You know, we're here to remove carbon, to help the climate, to also help farmers. We want to do good, and that's like the first principle of everything that we do. So I think us having high standards, buyers with due diligence having high standards is only going to help the space and only going to help us as a company. So I just want to make an emphasis on that. Reputational risk is everyone's. It's not just the buyer, I think.
Erik?
Yeah, so in our case, I mean, we just made an investment decision for £1 billion investing right now in Stockholm. That kind of investment obviously must be foregone by quite a large process, which includes the buyers. So at that point, we had sold 70% of our production capacity for the first 10 years. And the most important anchor buyer is Microsoft. They are, if you have been through a process with Microsoft, you know what it feels like. And they are very thorough in their due diligence. And I think in general, you know, to create trust on the market, transparency is everything. I mean, you need to be transparent in everything from, you know, how you quantify your removals to how your project is progressing, you know, everything the customer needs to know because they are putting their trust in you and you need to respond to that by being transparent. So, you know, for us, we signed this deal with Microsoft in the spring of 24, and we signed in parallel a big deal with Frontier, which is really, you know, the other tech companies, Google, Meta, and a few others. Those processes were like joint business development processes because, as you may know, I mean, there are very few market standards. I heard about the previous panel, they were talking about standards. And there are very few. I mean, of course, there are standard setters and registries that have some kind of methodologies attached to them. But in general, things are gradually becoming more standardized, for example, with the CRCF now in Europe. But with that lack of standardization, the very close dialogue with the buyer is always key. And in some cases, you have very informed buyers. Microsoft is one of them. They spend millions of dollars on Carbon Direct, who will then do the due diligence on you. And they are extremely thorough and you know, everything. Other buyers may not have those resources. And then the resellers and the you know, like Curate and others play a very important role to help them out. So it's different, but the key in general to the market is transparency, I would say.
Yeah. I think we'll get into a lot on transparency and also about this buyer-seller relationship as things go on. We have a few questions from the audience. I think the first one's actually quite
It's
good
definitely-
for Gabrielle. It's from Josh Brown from NG, and he asks, what is the differentiator among the many brokers and advisors with similar proposals, and can all these businesses survive?
The brilliant question. Josh, where are you? There you are, Josh. Great question. So there are a lot of brokers and advisors out there. Not all of them will survive. Some of them are already on the brink of not surviving, and the same applies to the carbon removals ecosystem as a whole. This is the way that new ecosystems are created, right? So we'd be expecting, when I did my TED talk on carbon removals back in 2021, there's a handful of companies and a handful of methods. We're now tracking more than 2,000 carbon removal suppliers, and then there's a whole lot of intermediaries out there, including not just for brokers, but also for MRV, for measuring, reporting, and verification, for methodologies, for registrations, for registries, they're all over, right? So the answer is no, they will not all survive. So what's the distinguishing characteristics? How do you tell between them? What's the differentiator? Obviously, I'm going to say the differentiator for Curate. So I'm an OG in the whole climate space, as I confess, hence all the grey hairs. My co-founder, Marta, is not an OG from climate. She's an OG from fintech. So she came to this with an immense experience of finance, an immense experience of technology, and I've brought in the climate. And we've used that to design the business. So we are not here to be brokers and resellers only. We are building a data system. We are building software that's scalable. We're using AI. We're using LLMs. We're also doing forward financing. We have a flywheel. We work with buyers to help them get offtakes from the suppliers, and then we use forward financing to collateralize those offtakes. And so we're working with banks. We're working with financial institutions. And one of the reasons to do that is that everybody has a very detailed due diligence process. We have extra pillars in ours, and one of them is risk of non-delivery. We've been doing that from the beginning. It's now just starting to surface out there in the world. But of all the hundreds of sub-factors that we have in there, we think the biggest risk of non-delivery is associated with running out of money. If the money doesn't get in the hands of the people with the shovels, they will fall. So this is a way to de-risk the purchase. If you do an offtake, we can forward finance it. You don't need to put the money up front. It becomes a flywheel. The money goes to the suppliers who then have more chance of being able to deliver it. And we've also done the detailed due diligence to make sure that they're actually doing the science along the way. There's another thing I'd like to add. I've heard this question in the earlier panel about co-benefits. I'm starting a campaign here, so let's see if it comes back. I'm starting a campaign to change this from co-benefits to core benefits. Core benefits, all right? So if it comes back, you heard it here, all right? Because they're not add-ons. They're actually fundamental to the likely success of the projects. If we're assessing what's the risk of non-delivery from the project, if they have the right environmental and social core benefits, then they're more likely to deliver. So we're there not just to be brokers. We're there to set up this flywheel of understanding risk, getting the financing in, doing the diligence, and working with the suppliers. And we feel that that's the way, not just to kind of have a corner of a piece of the market, that's the way to make a market. And that's what we're here to do.
Just a quick follow-up. Where do you think we are on that sort of timeline between sort of the Wild West that you talked about in 2021 and a mature market where you have buyers and sellers that understand each other reasonably well and the price is, if not completely regulated, at least subject to specific norms?
What we need the standards, we need the regulation, we need the compliance. That's why it's so important that it's now coming into view. That's the thing that will make the material difference. So if CFOs say, is anyone telling us to do it? When they tell us to do it, we'll do it. And so that's starting to happen now, and that's very encouraging, but it's still not there yet. And in the meantime, I'd say this is going to happen, but unless we accelerate, it's not going to happen fast enough for us to meet our climate goals. So 24/7, all that I care about doing all the time is what does it take to accelerate it, which is why, for that question from Josh, which is why we do all those things. You don't accelerate it just by doing one piece of it. You only accelerate it by having a flywheel. So I would say, we've come a long way in 5 years, but we're not on track. We need to accelerate, and that's what I'm working on.
Well, I think the next two questions, I think they're both for Alice, but I think they're very on point for this. One is from Emily Jackson, the other one is anonymous. The first question is, Alice, how did you get the rest of the Mercedes team on board for this purchase? Any tips for internal battles? And Emily's question is much more targeted. what was your business case when you pitched carbon removals to your CFO?
Perfect. I will go for both of those. So I think one of the key things for us when kind of pitching carbon removals is actually that it's part of our holistic sustainability strategy. So when we set our net zero targets, it's exactly to your point. We spoke about how do we reduce by 75%, the emissions that we've spoken about, but also as part of that reduction, a key part is that we will be removing that 25%. So when we got buy-in for that commitment and buy-in to do the projects around biofuels, around sustainable aviation fuel, we were also seeking buy-in for carbon removals and understanding that they were a core part of reaching net zero. So part of it was helping the business understand that this is part and parcel of our net zero journey. Specifically with the CFO, it was really spending time helping actually firstly understand what a carbon removal is in a really simple term. It is intangible by its nature. And if you're used to dealing with things you can see and touch and understand, it's slightly harder. So really taking the time to explain what a carbon removal is and why it is valuable to us as a team. Why does it help us get to net zero? And then really pitching it within the language of a sports team. And so again, going back to the idea that this aligns to our core business values. This aligns to being innovative. This aligns to research and development, and really also excitement. What we are doing in F1 is exciting at the end of the day. And actually this market can be exciting. And so saying actually people are pioneering in this space. The work that's happening over here is groundbreaking and pioneering and exciting. And so actually framing the business case in the language of our team was really important, not making it purely technical, purely scientific, making sure that was there so that when the CFO does probe and ask the question, okay, well, tell me about this specifically. Why am I paying for this? Why is this a different price to this? Being able to explain that with the science, but really actually framing it in how does it help us achieve our objectives and why are we doing this as a team? And also how will this help drive change across industry and show that we are leaders in global sport and sustainability? So it's multi-pronged. There is no easy answer, unfortunately, but I think it is about building it into your targets from the start and really making it clear how it benefits your business specifically.
And Alice, maybe asking for a friend, but what was sort of the position or role of core benefits in this talk as well?
Really good. And coming back to core benefits, I think also very helpful when we think about one of the things we want to do as a team is, again, we go racing in many countries, having a positive impact and leaving a positive legacy where we go racing. It's very similar to the idea of these or core benefits, where actually the positive impact outside of what is being done purely on the ground is super important. Talking about employment opportunities, talking about with regenerative agriculture, one of the key things for the team, and actually something that was really understandable and digestible to the team, was saying, if we invest in regenerative agriculture, yes, we are going to get carbon removal credits and we're going to get value there, but we're also going to be helping food security in the UK, which we know and we hear a lot about in the media is challenging at the moment. So really being able to frame it in things that are already being spoken about and how actually this investment here has all these knock-on and ripple effects outside of the main investment is actually a really positive sell as well.
Good to hear.
From the sell side, what does it look like in terms of how you sort of look at the carbon removal versus the or core benefits?
I was just thinking about core benefits makes a lot of sense for us as well, because the core of our project is done by the farmers. We're paying them and it's seen as a co-benefit, but it's a core benefit because that's the reason that we set up these projects and that it can actually produce biochar there. So I think for us that's huge and also integral to our project in general. Yeah. And I think, the dollar that a company has spent on a company as Carboneers, we're bootstrapped. So these dollars are, first of all, building the company itself. Then it goes a second part in removing the carbon. But it has a third knock-on effect, and that's the co-benefit in, for example, enhancement of the soil and increasing crop yield. So your dollar goes such a long way spending it this way.
Just to bring in Erik and Christina in terms of sort of what you're looking at in terms of the relationship between core benefits and the sort of the general carbon removal strategy. How do you guys approach this in your businesses?
I think there are also core benefits for us too, for sure. I think what's interesting about Brazil actually is that it has a long history of using rock powders with agriculture that existed long before this was thought of as being a carbon removal technology. It dates all the way back to the 1950s with a movement called the Rochagem movement, where it's very small scale, not very many farmers adopted it, but they started using locally sourced rock powders as fertilizers. And that's because Brazil actually imports most of its fertilizers. It's very subject to price volatility, external price volatility. And so trying to shift to something that's more locally available, that's readily available, doesn't have to transport it sort of huge distances, it's cheaper, was something that was seen as a potential benefit already. I think, unfortunately, it never really took off. I think still only about 1% of farmland use rock powders in agriculture. And then it was realized that actually this use of this fertilizer could also remove carbon, could provide additional benefit if we were to incentivize it at larger scales, at higher application rates. And so, yeah, the kind of beginnings of enhanced rock weathering really go back to the benefits. So the fertilization effect, the improvement of the soils and the crops first, and then carbon removal kind of came along. So I would say, yeah, when we sell this to customers, when we talk about it, we talk about both of these things in synergy. We talk about regenerative agriculture, the benefits, as well as the carbon removal as well. So yeah, very important for us.
Great.
Yeah, and in our case, I mean, we are an energy provider. So, I mean, we provide today from this combined heat and power plant running on these forest residues, power and heat to Stockholm. So this plant delivers today 350 megawatts of heating, 150 megawatts of renewable power. To that plant, we are now retrofitting the carbon capture equipment to allow it also to produce carbon removals. So it's just another benefit to an already existing benefit where the biofuels are offsetting fossil fuels. And so, I mean, it's very much about creating, core benefits or co-benefits, whatever. And actually, so this done right also, like in Stockholm, we do this carbon removal projects on the district heating platform, and that allows us even to do it without energy penalty. Because even though we are using quite a bit of the electricity that we generate in this plant to run the capture process, we get the same amount of energy back at the back end of the liquefaction to inject that into the district heating system. So we are not losing, and that goes out to the Stockholmers for heating. So we are actually not losing any energy in this process, even though we are trading some of the electricity for heat and removed carbon.
We have quite a few questions that have just come in. Gabrielle, this next one is for you, sort of looking at the market positioning. Do you take any direct exposure to delivery risks, or how is your risk allocated between yourself, the portfolio, and the buyer?
Yeah.
I think it's a lead in the second question.
There's actually the first and second question are quite related. The second question, what do you see the role of insurance for either the developer or financier? And is the risk fully passed through on the delivery risk? So when we started doing this, we were actually offering a replacement. We were worried about delivery risk and nobody else really was. And so we offered this replacement and nobody really wanted to take it. So we removed that. But we actually did a first of a kind forward financing instrument. Was it 3 years ago? With Standard Chartered Bank and British Airways, who provided the offtake, and an enhanced rock weathering company. And for that, we had to do bank grade diligence and bank grade risk assessment, and we're continuing to do that now. I think we're working now with 4 or 5. I slightly lost track. Global banks who are now. The money's there. They want to put it in there, but they need to understand the risk. So part of it is that the bank grade diligence, but then we wrap insurance around it for the banks, because for them it's important not just that it gets delivered, but it has to be delivered on time if you've got debt secured against it. And we're also starting to get some clients who are saying, can you actually help us with the potential for swapping out on a spot basis? So we've developed a matrix, which is looking at the different methods and saying which are the ones that we think are likely to be available on spot in different years, and which are the ones that are likely to have the biggest risk of non-delivery in those same years, and then matching those to be able to make recommendations about risk. And the other thing there is, just as Alice said, it's not about not having risk, it's about mitigating it. So as long as you know that you have a way to think about it, that's the way to do it. And the final thing I'd say about that in insurance is I think that insurance is going to be important more widely in this space, because companies will fail, not just because they run out of money. Some of the technologies will not work. We've got, I'm happy to say, an extremely good record of predicting which ones are not going to fail, but some of them will fail anyway. So it's not about avoiding risk, it's about managing and mitigating it, and that's what we're doing here.
That be mostly on the part of the buyer or the part of the broker?
Sorry?
Was in terms of risk mitigation, where do you see the balance between the
So in terms of,
startups,
is the risk passed through?
Yeah.
So we had contracts in the past that said, if this fails, we will substitute for you. So we were taking that risk.
Okay.
And then that was not something that buyers wanted to do. So now we're just starting to get buyers saying to us, within our contract or as a separate service, can you offer us a service where if something fails, you can find something else for us? So I think as the realization that this is a new industry, there is some risk of non-delivery starts to come in, that's starting to come back.
Starting to create a financial market for the
Exactly.
insurability.
It's, if nobody's afraid of risk in banks. If you can price it, you're great. It's just if you can't price it.
Great. We have two more questions, both of which are for Alice. The first one is about Mercedes' role impacting other teams within Formula One. Is this something that you've seen catching on with your competitors, or is this something that's across the league, or sort of where does that what does the state of the league look like? Are you pioneering a new business model?
Yeah, great question. I think for us, we've got this ambition as Mercedes Formula One team that we want to be one of the most sustainable global professional sports teams, not just within Formula One, but across sport. And I think what's really important to us is that we can show that you can have a sport that you love, that you're deeply passionate about, but it can be more sustainable and it doesn't impact your fandom. If anything, it makes it better. And so what we hope by kind of making these investments and commitments, like we've seen with our investment in sustainable aviation fuel, which we made back in 2022 and have continued to grow, is that actually we'll see other teams and other sports start to come along. We've seen that in Formula One. Other teams are now investing in sustainable aviation fuel because it's recognised that our sport exists and that we have to fly around the world to do that. So we're starting to be able to set the benchmark and show people how you can do it credibly. That's what we hope to be able to achieve in the removals market. And there is great work that has started. What we're hoping to show by creating this diverse portfolio and this large portfolio is that you can do it at scale and that you can drive that change, and there's a whole variety of technologies. So yeah, really excited and hopeful to see this kind of be adopted across sport.
We actually have a few questions sort of drilling down a little bit more detail on that last question you asked. One asking about sort of, do you look at sort of geography, target regions? Do you look at specific technologies? Do you look at specific sort of, what do you look at in terms of the trade-off between your bang for your buck for carbon removal versus the co-benefits that we've talked about? Sort of what's the thought process going on in your department when you have a portfolio? I'm sure everyone's asking for a friend.
Yeah. Well, when we did it, we actually boiled it down to kind of a bullet point list. Like when I think back to the plan on a page kind of a couple of years ago when we started thinking about this, it's not actually a hugely long list, because actually I think what we're all looking for is quite similar for us. As I've said, we travel around the world, and so we were looking for geographic diversity. We were looking for projects that were either in race locations or race regions, and it's really exciting that some of the projects that we're going to be working on are in countries like Brazil, which is one of the most exciting races. So that was really important to us. Technologies were also really important to us. Being able to look at those innovative solutions, very aligned to the R&D nature of Formula One, but also critically making sure that we believed they were credible, that they could scale, and that's where diligence is really important. But it was quite a short list at the end of the day to start with, and then we went to the market and we started asking those questions, and then the list inevitably gets longer and you dive in and you uncover and you learn a lot. But kind of initially, actually, that starting point was fairly simply kind of what are the core business principles that we were after.
Yeah, go
Just a quick comment on that, because the three questions that we've been told CFOs ask, and this is also for Emily's questions as well, is anyone telling us to do it? So the standards are starting doing it. What's anyone else doing? And how is this relevant to our business? And we've been hearing a lot of buyers saying, make it relevant to our business geographically, or to our supply chain, or to our value chain, or something that ties us to the business. That's increasingly important when you're thinking about doing your portfolio. So that's a relevance to the business. What's anyone else doing? It's also, it was all the tech bros until very recently. And now we've just started to get, we had a round table today where the range of different companies and the range of different sectors that was there in the room, this is happening, you can smell it. And the final thing I want to say is it doesn't have to be starting big. Even Microsoft didn't start big. This is a way to start to engage, start to learn, just get on the track, and then be part of this whole story. And it's just the best fun in the world.
We're almost out of time, but I'm going to close with one question, sort of give everyone a lightning round. And that's the question of, across the carbon credit market, what is the one thing, aside from increased buyer demand, that you would most like to see in 2026? Erik, I'll start with you.
Apart from buyer demand.
The question
Buyer
was
demand
very
is
specific. They knew where-
is
they
what
knew
we would
the
like to
answer
see.
would have been.
But apart from that,
If anyone else wants to jump in.
Well, I can take over. Maybe we're already talking about co-benefits, so maybe talk again about co-benefits. I think it's great that we're talking about it, but I think the next step is also to be transparent about it and certify it. So if you do pay farmers, be financially transparent about it, how much you pay them of your revenue. If you do increase the yield, then tell us how much percent. And I think this transparency is key to actually build a market also on the core benefits part.
I think I'd agree with that. Just transparency in general is something I'd like to see, not just from core benefits, but also just from your carbon credits, your carbon credit quantification, how that works. It's something that we're really committed to, is transparently sharing all the data underlying how we've quantified something. So that's something I'd like to see. And also just more standardization from governments actually would be really great.
Transparency, standardization.
Yep.
yeah, so I would say that given now that I cannot speak about buyer demand, which would be good, and compliance markets. But anyways,
we're all in-
yeah, exactly. But what is very important is that, find schemes that gives recognition to buyers, because, like in many Europe tried to get a green claims directive in place to really set the rules for how you claim what you've done. They failed. We need that kind of rules for making companies that are doing good by buying these services. Also, they have a right to and a way to communicate what they're doing. This is something we're lacking today.
So buyer upstream, transparency, coordination. We've run over. So very quickly, Alice and Gabrielle, one thing you'd like to see.
I think it kind of links to the point you were saying, people just starting, even if it is starting small. And I recognise that I am a buyer, so I would probably be saying buyers doing more. But I think it is buyers starting small is fine. I think the confidence to take that first step in the market, it is a complicated market, there is risk, but building confidence and understanding that risk and taking that and then being transparent about that and all of the kind of points that the other panelists have made.
Perfect. And Gabrielle?
So what I want one of the things I want to happen is going to happen this year, which is the SBTi are going to produce their revised net zero standard. The ISO net zero aligned organization 14060 for the nerds among you is coming out this year, and both of them will say you have to do short-term targets for your removals, bringing it into focus. That's really going to happen. So I'm excited about that. And the one thing I'd like to happen that I don't know is going to happen, so you can all help me, is everyone talking about this and understanding how it fits. It's the narrative of this is core to climate, this is core to business. And also, by the way, in all my born days, I've been doing this for a long time, this is the most exciting thing I have ever touched. Every single project is thrilling when you dig into it. So more people talking about it and understanding how exciting it is what I would like this year.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's an excellent panel. And thank you. Just leaves me to thank the panel for the wonderful discussion.
Thank you.